Delegates to your places, please. I know the time comes when you start to think it's a long haul. That fatigue starts to set in a little bit, and we just need to stay motivated. It's a little bit like when you go on one of those transatlantic flights. At first you start out with enthusiasm, and then partway through you kind of fall asleep a little bit, and the energy is kind of gone, and then you need that person to come around with the warm towels, and you can just kind of wipe your face with that warm towel and feel a little bit refreshed. But take heart. We're getting closer to the end of the flight. The landing gear isn't out yet, but we're getting closer to the end of the flight. So take heart. Let's all work together. Let's focus, concentrate, cooperate, and we're getting closer. Yeah, Ben? Isn't it Ben?
Ben Bo, there you go.
I said Ben, and it looked like you were looking over your shoulder for somebody else.
I was looking for the sound guy.
Okay, I thought maybe you had a
Ben
monkey.
Bowater, Classes Kalamazoo. I was wondering if I could just have 30 seconds of the floor before we move on.
Yeah.
That experience of going through the abuse of power and putting up the rocks and singing was tremendous and beautiful. But I just wanted to spend 30 seconds just telling you how I experienced it. I feel very dirty right now. I feel like I need to take a shower. And the reason being is recommendation C3K2, that Synod affirm the importance of care and the use of language within church assemblies with attention to the impact of language that harms the ability of others to fully exercise their gifts and callings. I really struggled to read through those things as a body when I know that it's still in our church order that we allow the beginning of Synod to allow a group of people to say that one group of people can be here and another group of people may not. In my mind, that's abuse of power, and I really want Synod and our churches to wrestle with how we could do a better job to work through this issue that we haven't talked about in a long time.
Okay, Carl, we are going to resume our conversation where we left off. We are dealing with Roman numeral 2, Congregational Services of the Christian Reformed Church.
I believe that's where I'm at too, so let's go. Committee for Contact with Government, Christian Reformed Center for Public Dialogue. Our recommendation is that Synod accept the report of the Committee for Contact with the Government, Christian Reformed Center for Public Dialogue with thanks for their work, noting with celebration their 50 years of ministry. So move.
You have before you recommendation 2. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. That is carried. Do we have in our presence here anyone that's with the Committee for Contact with the Government? Thanks, Darren.
I think, before you clap, I think special attention should be given to Mike Hogater, our current director.
Yeah.
So Darren would like to deflect the attention, the applause to Mike Hogater. Darren, through you, our greetings and appreciation to those on the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We move on to B, Disability Concerns. The recommendation that Synod accept the report of Disability Concerns with thanks for their work, noting their ministry with older adults, sort of a new focus, a new emphasis.
Recommendation B2. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. That is carried. Is there Anyone present here from disability concerns? Mark was here earlier, yeah. I know, we test people's patience. Anyway, our thanks for the record.
There he is.
You were taking a well-deserved extra long break, so our appreciation to you. Okay.
Thank you. We proceed to C, Indigenous Ministries, Canada. Recommendation that Synod accept the report of Indigenous Ministries with thanks for their work in coordinating and engaging with local churches in more intentional reconciliation.
That motion is before us. Discussion. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. It's carried. Is anyone present from Indigenous Ministries? Darren, why don't you stand again? We've been waiting to be able to show off how busy you actually are, so this is great.
So the key individual here is specifically a wonderful woman named Shannon Perez, who's out of Winnipeg.
Okay. And once again, as before, our gratitude to this organization through you and to Shannon and others. Thank you.
Letter D, Race Relations. Recommendation that Synod accept the report of Race Relations with thanks for their work, noting their extensive work in mercy and justice.
You have before you recommendation D2. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. It's carried. Anyone here from Race Relations? There he is. Reggie. Thank you, Reggie.
Letter E, Safe Church Ministry. Recommendation that Synod accept the report of Safe Church Ministry with thanks for their work, noting their first reports on classis Safe Church teams. And I would just also like to note in that context that this is the 25th anniversary of Safe Church Ministries as well. So we want to congratulate and celebrate that, particularly in the context of the experience that we just went through.
Recommendation E2. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same sign. It is carried. And who's here from Safe Church? Is Bonnie here? Bonnie? Is Bonnie here, or
Bonnie
is...
Nicholas was here earlier, but I believe might have left. So.
Okay. Well, you know what? When she comes in, if she comes in again, someone alert us so that we can show our appreciation, or start some spontaneous applause and point in the right direction so that we can thank her.
Yes.
Okay?
Okay, letter F, Social Justice and Hunger Action. Recommendation that Synod accept the report of Social Justice and Hunger Action with thanks for their work in response to Synod's 2012 report on creation care.
Recommendation F2 is before us. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Is carried. Is anyone here from Social Justice and Hunger? Yeah, again. Reggie, remember the fun that we had when we sat beside each other for a week? I remember. Yeah, I do too. Okay. And on to Section 3.
Section 3, Friendship Ministries. And the recommendation is that Synod accept the report of Friendship Ministries with thanks for their work in collaboration with the CRC, noting the new inclusive small group curriculum together.
Okay. Recommendation 3B is before you. You know that was not because we said recommendation 3B is before you. You know that's because you walked in. Receive our appreciation and our thanks. Okay, recommendation 3B. Anyone speaking to that motion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, the same sign. That is carried. Anyone here from Friendship Ministries? Okay, then our appreciation to them in absentia. It's wonderful to end this report on a note of friendship, isn't it?
Exactly.
Was that strategic?
Well, it was,
Okay.
yes. I would just like to say for our advisory committee number 4, it was very much a delight to meet the directors or their representatives and hear the scope of their ministry, and it was a privilege to be a part of that. So,
You've been up here for a long time, Carl.
I have.
And thank you for your services, and thank you to your advisory committee. I know, and don't say that in an ominous way. We look forward to your return. Okay, so we're going to move on now to Advisory Committee 9C, and we've already discussed earlier in terms of how that's going to work with chairing and with a vice-all in that interim position. So we're going to make that transition at this point.
Got to get used to this chair. Okay, we have Committee 9. Chair is David Struck. The reporter is Greg Janke.
Thank you,
9C.
Mr. Chairman. This is 9C, and I've had a little while to think about how we're going to begin our work through this report, and I thought, I know it's after coffee, and probably some of you have grabbed some extra coffee and whatnot, but I think it'd be really good if we just sort of sit back a little bit, ease back, close your eyes if you'd like. If you feel yourself nodding off, just go with that. I might even sing a little lullaby, and then after everybody's sort of comfortable and snoring, then we'll pick it up. So, now, I do want to begin by, I know this is at the end of our recommendations, but I want to begin by just thanking the Synod Review Task Force for their work, trying to help us do our work better is oftentimes, I think, probably a thankless job, and grateful that they were willing to take up that task and to try and take something that works really quite well and find ways that maybe we can improve it and streamline some things. So grateful for the work that they put into this, and thankful for the opportunity we had to spend some time hearing from members of that task force and hearing what it was that they were trying to accomplish and what it was that they are proposing. So grateful for their work leading up to this, but also grateful for their spending some time with us as an advisory committee. So, Mr. Chairman, our report is in 3 sections, and the first of our recommendations, and I'm just going to read the point number 1, and then we'll go through each one of these in order. But first part of our report is our recommendations is that Synod adopt the following recommendations as presented by the Synod Review Task Force in their report. So if you read the report, the numbers may not match up because we had to reformat them in our report. But if you read the report, these are recommendations as they were presented in their report. And first is that Synod recognize that in general, the current format for conducting Synod, along with the typical agenda template, has served the denomination well with the attached grounds, and we so move.
Okay, it has been moved. Do I hear support? Support. Any discussion? Okay, seeing that there's nobody on the queue, are you ready to vote? Those in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
1B, that Synod encourage classes to develop and or maintain policies through which the classes would provide remuneration to delegates who are financially disadvantaged through service to Synod. Each classes can determine a fitting amount of remuneration on the basis of its location with the attached grounds, and we so move.
Any discussion? Seeing that there is no one on the queue, are you ready to vote? Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Recommendation carries.
1C, that Synod arrange for a volunteer on-site mentor guide and offer that person service to young adult representatives and ethnic minority persons, advisors, or delegates to familiarize them with synodical procedures, to assist them in preparing to actively participate in synodical sessions, and to help them process their learning at Synod. The mentor guide would not have a voice or vote at Synod. With the attached grounds, we so move.
Any discussion? Seeing there is no one in the queue, those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
1D, that Synod no longer elect a second clerk as an officer of Synod, but have a staff member take minutes in close proximity to the desk to the clerk with the attached grounds, we so move.
Any discussion? Okay, we have 2 speakers, Joel Van de Werken.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I haven't had to sit up. I'm going to speak against the motion. I haven't had to sit up in the front, so I don't know what it looks like from that perspective. Certainly, any closer access to DRECR's knowledge is an awesome thing. But having been to 4 synods and watching it from this side of things, I think having the extra person up there is valuable. It gives opportunity for additional wisdom. I think it gives opportunity for additional diversity, and I think something would be lost if we removed the second clerk.
Michael Vanderlaan.
Mike Vanderlaan, BC Southeast. I speak against the motion. I will direct everybody's eyes to the front. If the reason is not clear to you right now, there it is.
Okay. Willem Delleman.
William Delleman, Classes BC Northwest, what they said.
Okay. Any further discussion? Okay. Those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Aye. Okay. Does not pass.
All right. 1E, that Synod follow a set meeting schedule that includes the following. Begins with orientation exclusively for the chairs and reporters of advisory committees the evening before Synod convenes in preparation for advisory committee meetings. 2, provides orientation for all, not just first-time delegates and advisors prior to the convening session of Synod. And 3, provides adjournment no later than mid-afternoon on the 4th day of plenary sessions and possible deferment of unfinished items on the agenda to the following synod or to the Council of Delegates, the interim committee of synod, if necessary, with the attached grounds, and we so move.
Okay. Any discussion? Seeing there is no discussion, those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
1F, that synod include time for worship and prayer in its schedule in the following ways. First, synod would begin each morning with a time of worship planned by a committee appointed by the program committee of synod and convened by the denominational Worship Ministries Office, with the exception of the final day when synod concludes with worship. The Synod Worship Planning Committee will be composed of a diverse group of delegates and advisors to synod and make use of the gifts of synod attendees as much as possible to carry out worship. 2, the Synod Worship Planning Committee would also be responsible for planning the Sunday synodical worship service using local congregations as much as possible in planning and implementing the service. And 3rd, prayer would be central to worship and become a more intentional feature of Synod's work sessions. With the attached grounds, we so move.
Any discussion? There's Tyler Wagonmaker.
Tyler Wagonmaker, classes Zealand. I just have a question, Mr. Chairman, and depending on the answer, a possible follow-up question. Just wondering, does this also include the opening morning worship when we first gather, for instance, on this Friday morning? Is that envisioned in this?
I'm curious what sort of answer doesn't involve a follow-up question. The Worship Planning Committee, in conjunction with the Program Committee, I believe, does plan that service. It does depend on whether or not we have a convening church. Our recommendation is that there continue to be a convening church.
Okay, and so that answers it. I believe the convening church would still primarily be orchestrating, the talents would be used for the opening Friday morning worship primarily then, if I understand that correctly.
That seems likely.
Okay, thank you.
Michael Vanderland.
Mike Vanderland, BC Southeast. Can you scroll it down to number 2, please? I'm speaking against this because of number 2. Number 1 is, I believe, as things are already, and I would like to think 3 is as well. So that number 2 is really the only change that's occurring here. I think we're adding too much to the Synod Worship Planning Committee. We've seen how much work they do just for our sessions in terms of worship. To add the Sunday worship service and trying to connect with all local congregations to make that happen is adding a huge amount of work worship planning-wise. That just seems way too much, and I also dislike it because we have to keep in mind the symbolism of having the local congregations' involvement in synod. There's a significant symbolism there, and I'm glad we're keeping the calling church for synod itself. Or you're proposing that, sorry, I misstated that. But it also happens here in the worship service, and I'd like to keep that in terms of having the local church lead that service.
Any further discussion?
If I can just respond briefly to that. Again, you indicated that in our recommendations is keeping a convening church. If that's the case, they would still obviously have a fair amount of involvement in that. I think one of the possibilities with the Worship Planning Committee is to coordinate with them so that maybe all of the services, all of the worship that we do during Synod, including the opening worship and the Sunday worship, all follow a similar theme or in some way become sort of a cohesive whole. That would be one way that they would coordinate with them.
Any further discussion? Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
1G, that Synod limit its agenda in any given year to include no more than 2 major study reports so that fuller and more thoughtful discussion can take place. With that attached ground, we so move.
Any discussion? Let's vote. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
1H, and unless the chair directs me to do so, I'm not going to read all of these, but that Synod adopt and implement the following changes to the rules for synodical procedure. Changes indicated by strikeout and underline, and then you can read all of them, and there are a number of them. So it's your call.
Do you want to take all of it as one, or do you want to take each one individually?
We have made no changes to any of these that we have here, and so they're exactly as was placed before the delegates in the materials prior to Synod. And so, assuming that people have read them, we can take them as a group. Okay, Mr. Chairman, can I cede the floor to Kathy here for a moment?
Yes.
Thanks.
I've just been asked to explain why these changes are proposed here. You've noticed in the past few days that there are some times when we have to huddle and pause and do a little bit of interpreting the rules and clarifying them. These changes are things that have been noticed over past synods and will really help with those situations. So a lot of them are things we've actually talked about, like a motion to withhold action. Is it debatable or not? We're trying to put into the rules the kinds of things that we've had to clarify on the floor. So it's really nothing new. It's not changing rules. It's putting things clearly in the rules so that they're documented and helpful for the leadership in the future.
And seeing that there is no discussion, there is nobody on the queue, we're going to take all of this as one unit. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
All right, Mr. Chairman, give me a moment. I have to catch back up here because some of my report disappeared. So there, we're done then. Clearly. Yeah. All right, I'm getting there.
You can speak Spanish and say aye.
Yeah, there you go. 1I, that Synod declare that the training of officers and the orientation of delegates and advisors include a basic review of the rules for synodical procedure, some of which we just voted to update. And we so move.
Any discussion? Those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
1J, that Synod add the following definition and descriptions of Synod to the rules for synodical procedure to explain why Synod exists, what Synod is, and what it does, and include this statement in training materials as well. Would you like me to read it?
Yes, please.
All right. Synod, what it is and what it does. What is Synod? The CRCNA Synod is an ecclesiastical assembly of delegates that provides governance and leadership for the members of congregations, classes, agencies, and ministries of the Christian Reformed Church in North America. The term synod is derived from the Greek synodos, meaning assembly or meeting. I wanted to give that some gravitas. So, what does Synod do? The CRCNA Synod fills an essential denomination-wide governance and leadership role alongside of the regionally delegated authority of the church classes and the locally elected church councils. The functions of Synod include, but are not necessarily restricted to, the following primary responsibilities: elect officers to lead the Synod meeting, provide a context for deliberative assembly, both in form of advisory groups and in plenary meetings, receive reports from the various denominational agencies, ministries, and institutions, and oversee their mandates, bylaws, and articles of incorporation, relying on the Council of Delegates as specified in the COD Governance Handbook, Receive and act upon the reports of study committees and task forces appointed by Synod. Appoint representatives to denominational boards, committees, and other working groups. Appoint or ratify the appointment of certain staff and leadership positions, including seminary faculty, college and seminary presidents, and the executive director of the denomination. Provide direction and instruction for denominational administration through the office of the executive director. Decide on issues of church order, liturgical forms, and confessional matters, such as church order or see Church Order, Article 47. Review denominational budgets, provide financial oversight to the agencies and ministries of the denomination through adoption of ministry share formulas, and approve annual ministry share amounts. Receive, discuss, and process overtures, communications, and appeals from classes, congregations, and individuals. Adjudicate judicial code matters and address appeals and recommendations brought before Synod by way of the Judicial Code Committee. Supervise and advance ecumenical relations by way of the Ecumenical and Interfaith Relations Committee. Oversee the archival work of the denomination by way of the Historical Committee. Approve candidates for ministry in the CRCNA and oversee other work of the Candidacy Committee. Ratify the appointment of synodical deputies and review and approve their work. Secondary.
Could you slow down a little bit for the reporter? The interpreter.
Oh, I'm sorry. I did forget about that. Let's pause. The secondary functions of Synod include the following: conduct orientation for all delegates and advisors, provide a denomination-wide context for worship, celebration, and fellowship, create opportunities for ministry-related learning via seminars, workshops, and discussion groups. And number 4, occasionally make known via letters or other forms of communication the denomination's position on current issues or affairs. And with the 3 grounds that we have attached there, we so move.
Any discussion after that lengthy description? Could you come to the mic, please?
Chris Mauer, Classes, Wisconsin. Item 9 up there under Section 1 or something. Talked about ministry shares and our approval of ministry shares.
Yes, it says review denominational budgets, provide financial oversight to the agencies and ministry of the denomination through the adoption of ministry share formulas, and approve annual ministry share amounts.
I guess that's going to come from the bottom up then? We're approving what the classes said that they're going to be donating, contributing?
Well, the ministry share formulas will still be decided at...
Okay.
Yes.
Perhaps we could find a different word than formula.
Yeah.
Am I correct that part of the issue is the approve annual ministry share amounts, because that's now coming from churches?
Nothing has changed yet, correct? Nothing has officially changed. This is still until it officially changes a year from now.
Yes, this will remain until 2020. That's what I was going to say at first. So this should not be affected. No, that's fine. This should not be affected. Any other questions, discussion? Okay, seeing there is nobody on the queue, those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
1K, that Synod be intentional about providing opportunity for purposeful dialogue during Synod, including the following considerations. And I will read them, and my apologies, I'll do it slower this time. Schedule time in plenary sessions and/or advisory committee meetings and/or elsewhere in the schedule of Synod to encourage space for dialogue. Provide time for dialogue in connection with significant and challenging topics and/or recommendations to be voted on to encourage learning and listening. Develop processes, depending where you're from, for learning from and listening to each other and the Holy Spirit. Offer discussion guidelines for being genuinely curious and for learning from one another, each other. Use the process of a Native American talking circle found to be effective by this task force or other methods so that everyone has an opportunity to be heard in a group discussion. In group discussions, account for diversity and different learning and discussion styles. And 7, provide tools for committee and group leaders to use with the attached grounds. We so move.
Any discussion? Seeing there is no one in the queue, no discussion. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
1L, that Synod improve the connection between Synod and classes and churches using the following methods. Item 1, in addition to sending a summary of the Acts of Synod to classes and churches after Synod, also send a summary of the agenda for Synod prior to Synod. These documents would be sent to the delegates to Synod and to church council clerks with an encouragement to pass them on to church members. 2, offer an easy-to-read guide to the issues on Synod's agenda. 3, make executive summaries of study committee reports available in other languages, such as Korean, Spanish, or other languages. Number 4, strongly encourage classes to invite their synodical delegates to speak to the classes about their experience at Synod. And 5, offer classes and churches tips on how they can encourage and support delegates to Synod.
We have 2 speakers. Lori Fieber, please come to the mic. And Joshua Van Drunen, please make your way to the mic.
I'm not sure, Mr. Speaker, if I'm doing this in the right order or not. I'm Lori Fieber from Classes BC Northwest. I have all these classes names in my head. I have a proposal that fits well with the previous letter.
Have you submitted it?
I did, but I don't know if you have it yet.
Yes, it's being printed right now. Go ahead.
Should I wait till it's up on the...
Is your proposal to this motion here now?
It was the previous one, but I was too slow to do all the electronic thingies.
It's already been voted on, so.
Oh, not to amend anything. It's like a new recommendation, like a proposal that's relevant. I don't know if I'm doing this right, so I'm proving all of the good revisions that are happening here.
Give us a second.
That's okay.
Okay, since this is not an amendment, we're going to table it towards the end.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
Joshua Van Drunen, Classes Georgetown. Considering the good work of the banner related to preparing the denomination for Synod, I'm wondering, Mr. Chair, if the committee reporter could speak to how the recommendation and the current work that the banner is doing would either be different or connected. Thank you.
Mr. Reporter.
I'm not sure I can speak directly to that. Just in terms of our conversation around this in the advisory committee, there was a strong sense that something there needed to be more. And so my guess is it would be that plus some, because there was still felt there were a lot of gaps and a lot of things that needed to be filled.
Any further discussion? Seeing that we have nobody in the queue, those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
1M, that Synod encourage classes to send one or more delegates to Synod for 2 consecutive years, if possible, to build continuity from Synod to Synod. And with the ground attached, we so move.
Any discussion? Mike Vanderlaan?
Mike Vanderlaan, BC Southeast. I speak against the motion. The recommendations, as they were in the agenda, had an underlying assumption that continuity would be better for the denomination. I believe that to be false. The more people who get the opportunity to serve as delegates to Synod will enrich our denomination better. This will continue to limit the number of people who get the opportunity to serve as a delegate to Synod. I don't think we want to be doing that.
Noted.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Again, we had some discussion about this in our advisory. Part of our comfort level with this, I think, is around the word if possible. It's not always possible. Your classes may decide that it's not recommended. But the idea is that there's some encouragement and there is some benefit. There's just some anecdotal stuff within our own advisory that those, especially elders who have come more than 1 year in a row, have found it to be much more beneficial in terms of their participation and ability to be part of the broader conversation. And so that's why we left it.
Yes, the language used in this recommendation says if possible.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Mr. Chair, the Synod Review Task Force had considerable discussion about this, reviewed the evaluation forms from delegates in past synods, and also did a statistical analysis of the trend with regard to first-time delegates coming to Synod. It noted that the trend of first-time delegates has been regularly increasing to the point where at Synod this year, I believe we have about 110 first-time delegates, something in that order. So that represents about 60% of us are first time. So we recognize that there's tremendous value in that in terms of the experience that people get and the leadership that's brought back from here to the denomination at the grassroots level in congregations and classes. So we see a tremendous value in the simply education and denominational experience that's gained from going to Synod. At the same time, there's another balancing factor, and that's the efficient working of Synod, historic memory carrying forward, leadership at Synod, that type of thing. And so in an attempt to balance those two virtues, the recommendation is being made that classes consider sending one or possibly more of their delegates, when possible, to consecutive synods. We hope that that creates kind of an equilibrium in balancing out those virtues of first-time experience and continuing experience for returning delegates.
Lori Fieber, Peter Kornilov, and Dirk Van Eyck, please make your way to the mics. Lori Fieber.
Lori Fieber, classes BC Northwest. I'm here for the second time in a row, and my second time at all, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chairman. And I just thought I'd reflect a little bit on that experience. Obviously, I still don't grasp all of the rules and procedures of Synod, but I feel much more prepared to engage, much more familiar with what it is that we're doing here and the meaning of what we're doing here, more connected. I have a lot of time in my life to do this, so I'm not speaking to that, but I do see personal value in being able to come 2 times in a row. There are things that were decided and acted on last time that I was part of that I've had the opportunity to provide context for and history for in my new committee. So yeah, I would say it's been valuable.
Peter?
Peter Cornell of Classes Hackensack. Mr. Chairman, I am wondering if our speaker or someone from the committee could help understand how they came to this recommendation in light of some of the flip-flopping that happened in the 90s on a certain tense issue where one synod approved something, the other one reversed something, and we still have that mechanism of one synod recommending, another one adopting. We're not afraid of sort of somebody stacking synod 2 years in a row? We talked about total depravity at one point, and I'm just thinking a lot about it.
I don't know if anybody from the committee wants to. My response to that is, again, the recommendation says, if possible, and it's encouragement, and classes are free to do what they want. So it's simply offering up a possibility.
Dirk and Benjamin.
Dirk Van Eyck, Classes Thornapple Valley. I'd call the question.
Okay. Question's been called. Okay, those in favor? Yeah, but okay. Benjamin Boersma.
Benjamin Boersma, young adult rep. I was actually.
Okay, can you hold on for a second? Let's vote on calling the question. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say same sign. Okay, then calling the question carries. Then, okay, now Ben.
All right, so Benjamin Boersma, young adult rep. I was actually on this committee. I kind of tried to bring in some of my input to this as well. This is actually my second year at Synod. I was here last year. There's actually kind of a similar mechanic to this that's going on with the youth reps at this current moment. We are allowed to come for the first year, kind of get our feet wet a little bit, and then if we so desire, we have the option to come back. The main difference between that and this recommendation is we only get 2 years of this, and then we have to go through the normal process. This could go on longer if so wanted, or you could break it up. But some of the advantages I've found to serving more than once is just having that experience, gaining that confidence. I know my first year, I really didn't have a clue what was going on. All this information is getting thrown at me. And just trying to figure out, okay, where do I even fit in all of this? Much less, what can I actually say to the issues? And then this year, having had that experience, sort of having a sense of what's actually going on in the denomination, I was a lot better equipped to actually speak on the relevant issues. And I think the sense I get from my fellow youth advisors is kind of similar. And also considering how many first-time delegates are here, I think having kind of that same sense, I think having another shot at this would be useful in certain situations.
Thank you. We're back to recommendation M. And please come to the mic. No, he tried to get in the queue.
I tried to enter the queue before we had the vote to call the question. If I'm not allowed to talk, then tell me to sit down. William Delleman, Classes BC Northwest. Just to get that out of the way.
Go ahead.
I appreciate the work of the committee. I speak against this proposal for a few reasons. One has already been mentioned. I was here in Synod 2016, and I believe that one of the reasons we may have so many first-time delegates is because we opened and embraced deacons being seated, and so there was a larger pool in that sense. But I also see that prospective office bearers serving 2 consecutive years may well reduce the pool of those willing to serve at all. And so that's, I think, a significant consideration because this is important work and very time-consuming. And the third reason is very often we are looking to make recommendations that need to be ratified by the following year's synod. And if we have essentially the same group working on the same material, then that sense of sober second sight or oversight is diminished. And so that's why I'm speaking against.
Any further discussion? We're back onto recommendation M, that Synod encourage classes to send 1 or more delegates to Synod for 2 consecutive years, if possible, to build continuity from Synod to Synod. Seeing that there is nobody in the queue, and the question has been called, are you ready to vote? Those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Aye. Motion carries.
1N, that Synod replace the term fraternal delegate with ecumenical delegate with the grounds attached. We so move.
Any discussion? Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against, same sign. Motion carries.
1O, that Synod instruct the EIRC to continue to include presentations and participation by ecumenical delegates and guests in a way that would maximize the benefit of their presence at Synod. With the grounds attached, we so move.
Any discussion? Seeing nobody's in the queue, no further discussion. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
1P, that Synod be served by a parliamentarian appointed each year by the Program Committee of Synod in advance of Synod with no limit on the number of one-year appointments he or she may serve. The duties of the parliamentarian would include advising the president with regard to appropriate procedure related to church order and the rules of synodical procedure, responding to procedural challenges from the floor, and serving with the officers of Synod when complicated procedural processes arise. The person appointed as parliamentarian should have demonstrated expertise in church order and meeting management, should be stationed in close proximity to the officers and other staff on the floor of Synod, would have the right to challenge the chair related to the rules of synodical procedure, and would provide training to the officers prior to Synod as well as in-the-moment advice. The position could be filled by the faculty advisor for church polity. With the grounds attached, we so move.
Okay, Joel Van der Werken.
Joel Van der Werken, Classes Atlantic Northeast. Just a point of clarification, with the exception of the seating arrangement, I'm trying to understand how this is significantly different from what the faculty advisor for church polity currently does.
If you want to, sure.
What this is a new officer's position. It would be filled by a volunteer who has expertise and gifts in this area. It frees up our faculty advisor to do other things if he or she wish to do that. And it also provides continuity because the same person can serve over a period of several years, or a different person can serve, and it helps us use the gifts of other people in our denomination.
One more follow-up.
Uh-huh.
Would this person also assist with sometimes on this body this week, there have been kind of complicated motions trying to figure out what do we really do to advance what we're trying to do in this discussion. Would that person also help in that role as well?
Yes, they'd be a servant of the delegates as well as the officers.
Steve Bootsma?
It didn't say in the written part, but what you said is they would be one of the officers? Did I get that? They serve the officers, because
Yes.
I was wondering if they were an officer, they would need to be a delegate with
Right.
voting authority.
Right.
They serve the officers.
Any further discussion? We're ready to vote. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
1Q, that Synod offer more extensive training for all delegates prior to Synod with online and printed materials that cover rules and best practices, and ensure on-site engagement with training materials led by trained educators before Synod begins. Doing so will help all delegates to engage with the material on Synod's agenda and to facilitate comments and questions, possibly in discussion groups. This position could be filled by the faculty advisor for church order and synodical matters. With the grounds attached, we so move.
Any discussion? Seeing there's no one in the queue, those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
1R, that Synod require training of advisory committee chairs and reporters regarding synodical rules, best practices for leading committees, facilitating discussion and participatory decision-making, following rules for advisory committees, handling differences, developing reports, and functioning in plenary sessions. Training could include the use of online modules, webinars, on-site instruction and discussions, and a video introduction to advisory committee meetings. With the grounds that are attached, again, we so move.
Philip Westra.
Philip Westra, Classes Atlantic Northeast. I'm trying to figure out where to interject this question to the committee, and I think it closest relates to this point. With the challenge of trying to be as prepared as possible for Synod, I think one of the things that often hampers some delegates is we're not sure when what reports get to us. I know there are deadlines for study committee reports, but there aren't always clear deadlines for task force, and we're juggling agenda and we're juggling supplement, and that has been, listening to other people's feedback, just kind of one of the challenges. And so I'm not sure where the timing of how timely classes get all the study reports, all the task force reports, to then process them at classes. I just know that's a challenge, and I don't know where that's addressed clearly in this study committee. So that's my question for the committee. Thank you.
To some degree, this is your question, I think, is addressed in 1T and an overture from Classes Hamilton. But I don't know if there's anything else. I mean, part of it is just, when stuff gets done and submitted and the like. We try to do things as timely as possible. So.
Any further discussion? We are on recommendation R. Seeing there is no...
Maybe just a few more words on that timing issue. So there are rules for when reports need to be available for the churches to see them, and they come out in the fall, and the idea is that churches and classes have time to read them and perhaps respond to them through overtures at their classes meeting in time to get those into the printed agenda. It's also true that there will always be classes meetings after the printed agenda is out, so there's always going to be a supplement. For synodical study committees and synodical task forces, there are rules about having those out sooner. For some other matters that fall under the COD, they're going to come into the supplement just like supplements from other agencies. So we can't change the problem of getting things late altogether, and they're not really late, it's a supplement. But the key issues, when Synod appoints a group to study something, if it wants to have it out in advance, then it has to be a synodical study committee or a synodical task force. I hope that helps.
Any further discussion? And we're ready to vote. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
Recommendation 1S, that Synod adopt the following provision pertaining to use of social media. That the training and orientation session for all delegates and advisors include guidelines to avoid inappropriate use of social media contact with non-delegates during advisory committee meetings and plenary sessions of Synod, because such use might compromise the transparency and integrity of the deliberative process. With the ground attached, we so move.
Any discussion?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
We did consider creating a recommendation that we would go on a 30-minute delay of the broadcast of this assembly, as the Reformed Church of America does, but the cost was too prohibitive.
Seeing that there is no one in the queue, I believe we're ready to vote. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
1T, that Synod not accede to the overture by Classis Hamilton from Agenda for Synod 2016, page 547, if you want to look it up, seeking to move the distribution date of synodical study committee reports to churches from November 1 to September 15, and again with the grounds attached, we so move.
Any discussion? Seeing that there's no one in the queue, we are ready to vote. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
And 1U, that Synod 2019 proposed to Synod 2020 the adoption of the following change to the church order. Change is indicated by strike through and underline, and they are printed there. The change is from Psalter hymnal to simply hymnals in the proposed change, and the ground is listed there. We so move.
Any discussion? We're ready to vote. Could you use the mic, Joel?
Yeah, just a point of clarification. Are we going now with all church order changes need to be ratified by a future synod, or is this one somehow deemed significant? Sorry, and I'm Joel Vanderwerk in Classes Atlantic Northeast.
I'm trying to find the original recommendation. The committee had more than one church order change, and this one may not seem as significant. The other one was more significant, so I think that's why they were both recommended for adoption the following year.
My speaker queue just disappeared. I believe we're ready to vote. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
And the last in this section 1V, that Synod instruct the executive director in consultation with the church order advisor to implement changes to the rules for synodical procedure as necessitated by the adoption of preceding recommendations in this report. We so move.
Any discussion? Seeing that no one's in the queue, those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
So, more than 2/3 of the recommendations we have dealt with. Now there's a few in section 2. That Synod adopt the following recommendations from the Synod Review Task Force as revised by the Advisory Committee. And the first one, letter A, that Synod follow a cycle of annual meetings taking place in Grand Rapids for 3 years in succession, one of which could be at another Midwestern location nearby, such as Chicago, followed by a 4th-year meeting in a region elsewhere in North America where CRC congregations are clustered. And with the grounds attached, we so move.
Any discussion?
Yes.
Mr. Chair, the recommendations that follow here, either revised or rejected, go contrary to the report of the Synod Review Task Force, which is a standing committee of the denomination. And as a point of order, then, the committee, we believe, has the option to claim precedence on that in terms of consideration. And so the Synod Review Task Force would like to exercise that privilege of precedence. So that means that as procedure, it would be our understanding that we would revert back to the original rather than the revised language of these recommendations.
Okay. How extensive are the differences?
That depends from one to the other. Some of them are less than others.
Would you like to take them separately? Then I will allow you to take precedence.
So yeah, Mr. Chair, you could do that with each one individually or whatever, but it might be simpler if you just allow the Synod Review Task Force to go through these recommendations, ruling that what is before us is the original wording rather than the revised wording.
Okay.
And of course, for due procedure, if the body wishes to consider the revised wording, it would require a motion to table the original motion and move to the other one.
Let me check with Steve. All right, the committee has precedence here, so we are going to allow him to present.
Mr. Chair, the first recommendation that would be before us, and we'll follow the sequence of the recommendations that came from the advisory committee, just to not make it confusing, just for simplicity. So first recommendation, that Synod adopt the following recommendations from the Synod Review Task Force. The original wording differs from the other with regard to a financial contribution. So the wording in the original, that Synod follow a cycle of annual meetings taking place in Grand Rapids for 3 years in succession, one of which could be at another Midwestern location nearby, such as Chicago, followed by a 4th year meeting in a region elsewhere in North America where the CRC congregations are clustered, with contributions to the additional cost of the 4th year meeting to be drawn from classes without financial hardship. We move that.
Okay, that is okay. Nathaniel Voss.
Nathan Voss, Classes Alberta North. I move to table the recommendation from the committee in favor of the one from the advisory committee.
So we need to vote on tabling it, right? Okay. All right, the vote is to table. A yes vote will be to table it. A no vote will be to not table. Okay. Those in favor say yes. Oh, yes. Hang on.
To table Bill's motion from the committee right now. To table that.
Yes. Okay, those in favor say yes. Yes. Opposed? Okay, it's tabled. So we're back to the advisory committee.
I appreciate that. Get another one or no? So again, Mr. Chairman, this is from the advisory. It is essentially the plan for 3 years in succession in Grand Rapids or a nearby Midwestern city, followed by a 4th year meeting in a region elsewhere in North America where CRC congregations are clustered with no financial contribution language included.
Has been moved? Yep. Supported? Support. Okay, any discussion? We have Drew Sweetman.
Drew Sweetman, Classes Muskegon. I have a question about the cost differential when we move from the Midwest to regions elsewhere in North America where CRC congregations are clustered.
What's the question about?
What's the cost differential? How much more money are we spending to go to the Northwest as opposed to staying in the Midwest?
I cannot answer that question because
sample was given in Appendix C in the agenda in the original report from the Synod Review Task Force, page 471.
I mean, I couldn't answer. You asked about Pacific Northwest. I don't think that's in there. So
I'm just using that as an example.
Yeah, there are some examples of of the cost differential when it was in Chicago and the like.
So may I ask a follow-up to that?
In Sioux Center, yes.
Okay.
Yes, you may.
Where does is there a budget then, is there additional budget allocated in those years that just comes out of the general synod budget? Is that planned in advance, knowing that you're going to a place that's going to cost more the next year?
Will?
Me?
Yes.
I'm willing. Jose, I'm willing. I'm willing to answer.
Yes, go ahead.
Yes.
Would you like to address the body?
The plan for addressing that was in the motion that just got tabled.
Okay. Nathan DeYoung. And after him, Daniel Mao.
Nate DeYoung, McCarran, Classes Grand Rapids East. I'm going to speak against this because it seems to me that we've had a lot of conversation, either officially on the floor or in informal settings, around reducing footprint. And yet here we are, again, wanting the moon and not paying for it.
Okay. Daniel Mao and Andrew Hansen.
Dan Mao from Classes Granville. I think the advisory committee must have had a relatively significant conversation about this and then removing that financial piece out of it. But we really haven't heard as a synod maybe at least a brief synopsis of why the task force believes it needs to be in there and the advisory committee is suggesting we better off not put it in. Could you give us at least a feel for how that conversation went?
Within our advisory, there were a number of issues that came up around the financial piece. One was that our understanding is that when it's in another city or another region, as the executive director indicated, ministry share contributions reflect that. We already contribute to it. Part of our discussion in the advisory had to do with equity. In terms of all classes participating in that, and rather than some receiving some kind of assessment that others would not have. Part of the other difficulty that we had is that there's no definition given for financial hardship in terms of how that's determined and who gets to determine it. And will the classes have the opportunity to make their argument that they are in fact financially, they have financial constraints, or if it's offered to them, will they have the opportunity to say, well, wait a minute, we feel offended because we don't think that sort of thing. There's just, there were a number of things that were not clear in terms of how it would be defined, and then added to that what I already mentioned in terms of the ministry shares already being contributed toward the cost.
If I could respond, because my title was mentioned. My first time on this issue, I said yes, and I said only one word because I am in a conflictual relationship here. I was on the task force, right? But I also have this responsibility to tell you how things work. So now I would like to expand on that yes. Yes, in the sense that whenever we're planning a budget, we look ahead for the costs we anticipate. But there is a finite amount of revenue that we receive, and based on history, we predict it. So let's just say that if the basic cost, as in Appendix C, is about $330,000, which, by the way, is a lot of money, okay? And I'm just going to pick a hypothetical location and say it's going to cost $60,000 more, okay? That $60,000 has to come from someplace. So once again, you're asking us to not do something. And I'd also ask you to remember that in 2016, Synod said that all new ministry proposals include a ministry share cost implication and or alternative funding plan. Okay? So if you want to spend more money, there needs to be an alternative way to consider where that revenue comes from. Now I have to be careful, right? Because I said I'm conflicted because I was on the task force. But we can't go to Edmonton without understanding where that money is coming from. Or another way to say that is, what aren't we going to do? What position are we going to eliminate?
Does this mean Alaska's out?
Yes, I'm sorry to say.
We have another speaker, Gerald Koenig.
Yeah, Jerry Koenig, Classes Granville. Going through that budget that we have there when it shows the difference between 2015, 16, and 17, I see the largest difference is the study committees. And how do you know that from year to year? If without the study committee, it would have been cheaper to go to Dort than it would be to be here. And so maybe we should go there every year. So there are so many variables in this that it's hard to determine where would the cheapest place be.
Answer that.
Any further discussion?
May I answer then?
Sure.
So you are right, Jerry. It's a multivariate challenge. We have earlier today tried to even out the study committee number of presentations, although it's not necessarily the cost of them showing up, it's the cost of the work throughout the year. And so I understand it's difficult to look at those three columns and draw grand conclusions, but some of these things I believe are self-evident. The cost for the Sioux Falls Airport is greater than the Grand Rapids Airport, and the Grand Rapids Airport is greater than Midway. It's hard to figure all that out, and the costs bump around in any given year. But I would just encourage you to think there are fixed costs associated with Synod moving about, such as a whole synodical staff, right? Some of the things we do know, and so this is self-evident, but I'll say it anyhow. You see a team in the synodical office, and you see some more over to my right. When they all have to travel and be lodged, it costs more.
Mr. Chairman, if I can just respond. Our advisory recognized that there are cost differentials. And we were very clear. I mean, we do recognize that. The issue is, how do they get paid for? And is it equitable for some classes to receive an assessment because they're deemed to be of greater means and some not? And in the way it was proposed, there was no definition of that. And so we were uncomfortable with that as the funding mechanism.
Stanley Grutoff, and then Douglas Fakema.
Stanley Grutoff, Classes Iacota. Just more of a, not a question for Claire, a point of order. The original recommendation that was tabled, if some of us feel that maybe that needs to be re-examined, is that tabled permanently, or can someone make a motion to look at that one again? I'm not necessarily advocating that. I'm just wondering if there's a way to go back to that to look at that.
They could motion to you could motion to table again. Doug?
Doug Fakema, Pacific Northwest. One question that has not even been addressed is why you would want to move Synod away from Grand Rapids. And you mentioned, I believe our executive director mentioned possibly in Edmonton. And I just want to remind those of you who live in the heartland how far away the Pacific Northwest feels from Grand Rapids, and the benefit that Grand Rapids has to hundreds of denominational employees worshiping in your churches, and the advantage to those of us on the extremes of the denomination to actually have a visit from the denomination would be incredible. And we've already made a huge move this week in the direction of returning the huge job of financial responsibility much more to the classes. And I would challenge you to consider what it would mean to classes on the far extremes of our denomination if the denomination actually showed up and people in the Pacific Northwest were able to see this happen in a way that Grand Rapids takes for granted. I don't think you realize how far away we feel when we don't get to see this, and what a difference it would make for the denomination for a synod to actually happen where a quarter of the churches are on the coast. And I don't think you realize how far away you are from us and the advantage that Grand Rapids has with synod meeting here so regularly. And I would ask you to take that into consideration as you think about this and the long-term progress, the long-term process of raising funds in classes in the Pacific Northwest when synod feels so far away. Thank you.
Well, in the grounds, it does say that various regions of the CRC feel more engaged in a part of the CRC when synod meets in their area. So that's part of it. Would the committee like to address that? Or?
Yeah, we did, as a group, recognize that very thing, that there are advantages. Clearly, moving around every year is not practical or good stewardship. But being able to try and do that once every 4 years into a region really does have exactly the kind of benefits that you raised in your comments. Absolutely.
We're going to take one more speaker and take a break. Marcia Hosmar.
Marcia Hosmar from Classes Hamilton, thank you. I'm not quite sure where we are in all of this, and I don't want to simplify the whole financial part, and I understand that in some classes this is a huge financial burden. Sorry, whoa. I think when God calls us to be here, we need to have faith that the money is going to be here for us to get here. I think we need to remember that we have brothers and sisters close by that I hope, if there's a financial restraint, that they will help us out. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to take a break right now, and the Executive Director has some words to say.
Michael, don't speak to me, speak to the chair.
Microphone.
Come to the microphone.
I'm just challenging the chair on taking the break right now. We've got 5 people in the queue. Let's just bang this out, please. At least get the vote on this, what's on the floor at the moment, so that we don't stop between a list of speakers.
Chair has been challenged.
Well, welcome to this momentous occasion. You have now experienced 4 people in the president position. And it's a deacon. Thank you. So we have the chair being challenged, and so that is, for your information, we have 6 people in the speaker queue. And so the decision for whether or not we take a break or move through those 6 people is what you are challenging, or what has been challenged. So is there support for the motion to challenge the chair? Okay, a vote on that. All in favor? Aye. Okay, so the chair, the
Point of order, all opposed?
Oh, all opposed?
Aye.
Let's do an electronic vote. So if you vote in favor of sustaining the chair, that means that we are going to go to break. Yes means break. No means we will go through these 6 speakers. And at this point, the chair, we're voting as to whether or not we sustain the chair. And the chair has said that we will go to break. So that's why a yes sustains the chair who's saying we're going to break and then come back to the discussion. No is that we're not sustaining the chair, which means we will continue discussion. Currently, that discussion is 6 people in the queue. Nobody has motioned to cease debate, so the queue remains open right now. So do we understand? Yes means you sustain what the chair had decided in terms of taking a dinner break and coming back to the topic. No means you're not sustaining the chair. We will continue discussion. Currently at 6 people. Is everyone clear? And you're using the yes-no electronic votes. You both get the chance to vote if you would like.
Nobody's like, I can't vote.
All right, so the chair has not been sustained. We will continue with discussion. I would like to flag for you if you want to cease debate, somebody should make that motion for the chair when he takes over.
Got to be in the queue.
The chair is back to Jose.
Welcome back.
All right. We have Andrew Hansen, Joel Vanderwerken, Drew Sweetman. Please make your way to the mic.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to call the question.
Yes. Do I hear a second?
Point of order. It's no applause.
Okay. All in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Okay. Yep. Joel, Andrew, Nathaniel? Drew?
Drew Sweetman, Classis Muskegon. I don't believe that we can approve this motion without a spending plan.
Okay. Stanley, Nathaniel Voss, Stanley Grotoff.
Stanley Grodoff, Class I Code again. I wish I was a little quicker on my feet and come up with an amendment, but I'm not quite sure. I mean, I know how to by clicking the buttons. I just don't know what to write, but I'm trying to articulate something that could the synod work ahead of time and say, okay, 2 years from now, maybe we want to have a synod in Pacific Northwest and be in dialogue with the classes in that area.
No amendments are possible right now.
Yeah, that would be amendment, wouldn't it?
Yes. Okay.
My apologies.
Nathaniel?
Nathan Voss, Classes Alberta North. Committee talked quite a bit about this. One thing I'll say is that we're a binational church, and so therefore I think it's appropriate that at some point a synod be held in Canada. Further to that, we as a church covenant together to fund the operations of the denomination. One of those operations is the conducting of a synod, and so we as a denomination should do that as a denomination.
Okay. Matthew Stobe? Okay. Go to the vote. Then we're ready to vote. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Aye. Okay. Motion carries. And now we'll take a break, and the executive director has a few words for us.
So let me turn your attention to something a little different. I have heard many people talk about the value of participating in synod and the denomination responsibility and all of the good that happens here. It is indeed a positive experience, although at times we get impatient or whatever. But I'd like you to think about a coin. Synod is one side of that coin. Inspire is the other side of that coin. So if you like the business of the church and committee meetings and debate, how much more will you like talking about ministry and sharing best ministry practices and learning from others and listening to plenary speakers like Ann Voskamp and Mary Holst and Sung Chung Ra and Ed Stetzer and a host of others? You have that opportunity August 1 through 3 in Windsor, and might I say, Ontario, Canada. Inspire started 2 years ago for the first time in Detroit, and now it's scheduled in less than 2 months in Windsor. I'd also like to make a note, since it seems that we've dropped the ball on basketball analogy, so I'd like to pick it up again. We the North doesn't work because Windsor is south of Detroit. But nevertheless, I think we should gather there. And when you come back from dinner, you are going to have something on your table. And what it is, it's one free registration. So think about it. It would be great to continue this feeling of participating deeply in the denomination by focusing on how we do ministry together across this continent and around the world. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, we are recessed until, hang on. Is that?
Marcia Hosmer? No, I'm wrong. Yeah, Marcia Hosmer. Our prayer?
We good? Good. Okay. So, in my home, when we gather for prayer, we hold hands at the table. So I invite you at your table to hold hands in a circle. It's just a symbol of complete unity and safety.
There you go.
I recognize that this might be a bit of a stretch for some of you, but if there's anything that I've learned from Synod, it's that God's going to stretch you beyond your wildest dreams. I should be 9 feet tall. So, let us come to prayer. Father God, you are good. All the time, you are good. You are mighty. You are powerful, you are healing, and your Spirit is in this place. There is passion in this room, there is sensitivity, there is fervor. We have celebrated, we have rejoiced today, we have wrestled a lot, we have lamented with each other, and we have wept. But through your Spirit, we have accomplished much. And as we head for dinner, I am so thankful for those who are working behind the scenes to just feed our bodies so that we have the energy to do the work that you have placed us to do in your kingdom. We are called to act with justice. We are called to love tenderly. We are called to serve one another and to walk humbly with our God. In your most holy, precious name, amen.
We will reconvene at 7 p.m.